It's like a big mesh now. It's not just, oh, hey, I know how to do SSO. If you know how to do SSO, that gets you in the door. But these other technologies are certainly what you need to know to be able to say, okay, I can apply for an IAM architect position.
Namaste, everyone. You're listening to Why Not IAM podcast, where we feature some of the greatest IAM minds and help you grow in your IAM journey. I'm your host, Ravi, and welcome to the third episode of our podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome a very special guest, Sal Mineo, a close friend and a seasoned IAM architect, having great expertise on Ping identity suite of products, with certification ranging on products like PingFederate, Ping Access, Ping One, and Da Vinci, and has worked on almost all the suites of Ping products. Sal has had an incredible journey, starting from his early days working as an IT analyst and system engineer to working as a senior customer success architect at Ping Identity. His wealth of experience and deep understanding of IAM makes him a valuable asset in the field. Join me in welcoming Sal as we deep dive into his journey and explore the world of identity and access management. This episode has been divided into three parts. The first one is about Sal's journey and how, in spite of several challenges in his life, including layoffs, he made it to being one of the seasoned architects. Although he made it look easy, but believe me, it wasn't though. Here we have also discussed about various roles and responsibilities of an IAM engineer and an architect. Second one goes deep into Ping identity products. You'll be hearing a lot about how Ping products work, what are the different suite Ping offers. And the third one goes around how he solves problem as an architect. So I learned a lot by just listening to him, where he has shared all the insight, and I'm sure you will definitely find answers to the questions you're looking for through all the episodes. This episode is for everyone looking for a great career advice on being a value adding IAM engineer or an IAM architect. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to India's first identity podcast. Why not IAM?
Thank you very much, Sal, for joining me in this episode where we discover the myths and mysteries of identity and access management and help our community grow.
Thanks for having me.
So, before we get into this, into the technical deep dives, I know a lot of our listeners are very much interested to know about the world of Ping identity, understand them. I would like your help to help our viewers, listeners, cover your timeline around your journey throughout from where you started versus becoming an IAM architect or a customer success architect at Ping.
Sure. So I started my IT career in really maybe late 19, but mostly 19. And I first started on a help desk. I joined an organization, a pharmaceutical company, and I went into the hiring manager and I said, I don't know how to do anything, but I will not forget anything you tell me. And they hired me on the spot. And I worked there. Company ended up, after a merger, was called Daiichi Sankyo, a Japanese pharma company based in the US as well. And I ended up working there for 17 years. I started on the help desk, fixing people's printers and Windows 98 and working my way up to, by the time I left there, I was a senior systems engineer is what they called it, really an infrastructure role where myself and my team ran Active Directory, virtualization, storage area networking, etc., VPNs, file transfers, basically any service, any IT service for the business to keep the users having a good working experience. And then towards the end of my years there at the Daiichi Sankyo, we started to implement single sign-on using Active Directory Federation services from Microsoft. And that was my first introduction to any IAM kind of technology using ADFS 2.0 to start kind of centralizing authentication rather than, as we all know, having multiple passwords for every application. It was really the start of that for us. And I did that there for like my last 2 or 3 years there. And unfortunately, Daiichi Sankyo at the time was, as a business, kind of going through some layoffs, and they had laid off people 2 years in a row. And the third round of layoffs was coming up, and they had asked for volunteers. And if you volunteered, your severance package would be made much more attractive. Myself, having been there for 17 13 years, I had a better kind of package deal than most of my colleagues. And really what happened was our director said, I'm going to need to, one of you three, myself and two of my colleagues who led the team, are going to have to go. I don't know which one right now, but it's going to be one of you three. So I volunteered. I was ready for a change, honestly. And like I said, the severance package was quite attractive for having been there for a long time. Volunteers even more. So I took the package, didn't know what was going to come next. And at the time, I was just looking around for jobs and I found another position with another pharma company where you and I met. It was Regeneron Pharma.
Yeah.
I took the position there as the Active Directory kind of engineering team. That was the focus of the position. I got it pretty quickly. I didn't really have to look around for jobs that long. And yeah, what happened there was my manager had some kind of personal things to take care of. And I started on a Thursday. And then by Monday, he was not able to come back into work for the next couple of months, which kind of threw a wrench in their plans, not just at the team level, but he was meant to be the lead on their Ping migration project. So they had already been using Ping1 for Enterprise, the cloud SaaS software, to do some SSO. They were migrating to PingFederate. And because I had that ADFS experience and he was not able to be on that team for an extended time, they asked me to join the team, which I did. And yeah, over the next 2 to 3 years at Regeneron, I became the de facto hands-on only technical person working on the Ping platform. With a partner, we did the implementation where I basically did technical oversight for the implementation, added any new connections. I did all the troubleshooting. I did all of the maintenance, you name it. I was the Ping guy. For the two, we had a test and a production, highly available cluster, regionally dispersed, the whole nine. And that's really where I learned a lot of what I thought at the time was a lot of Ping knowledge. Then you came on and a couple other folks, and I started bringing you in and sharing what I knew about the Ping software and the implementation there at Regeneron. And yeah, following that, I was a contractor at Regeneron and the writing was on the wall, like they were looking to phase out contractors. And I had tried to get, hired as a full-time employee, but they just weren't taking people on at the time. So I had already moved to California. So I was working remotely for Regeneron, who are based out of New York. And I just reached out to my sales account executive at Regeneron, a fellow by the name Steve Heyer. And I said, I'm out in California now, and I think Regeneron's going to be getting rid of this position soon. So if you have anyone out here that can use my skill set, let me know. And he immediately came back with, would you consider working for Ping? Which to me sounded amazing. I had always said to my wife, I wish I could just work Ping while I was at Regeneron working on Ping, because I always admired Ping as a company there. The way they took care of their customers when I was a customer was amazing. And this is before any kind of customer success team or anything like that. I would just reach out to the sales engineers that helped sell us the product and the technical support team as well. And I always received great support. And it just seemed like a great place to work. So when he said that, I jumped on that opportunity. And 2 weeks later, roughly, I was a Ping employee. It was that quick. I had joined the basically pretty new customer success team, which is the team there that is assigned to accounts that spend a certain amount of annual revenue there. We get assigned to them in a pair with a customer success manager, as well as a customer success architect, which would handle the technical bits. And that's what I joined as. So that's how I got to Ping in a quick, let's say 19 years in IT. I ended up at Ping as a customer success architect then.
So going back to your life at Regionon, right? I know we both fairly got chance because it was more of me joining in just to transition over things from on-site to offshore here in India. And that's where I think we met for almost 2 weeks, with Rakesh being one of our kind of bridging gap. I think you have worked with Rakesh quite a while.
Right,
I think
yeah.
probably for probably more than a year or so. I think that's where you both interacted. Even if it was a short duration that we both connected, I got to learn a lot from you. Like, again, Ping was new to me, and getting to hear perspective from you who have already worked from such a long time, it really helped me explore things. Now, I just want to understand, like, just for our viewers, when it was about working as a IAM engineer or a consultant versus working as a customer success architect, Like, what is the day-to-day roles and responsibility if you talk about these two roles?
Sure, of course. So when I was at Regeneron, we had a team of an IAM team, but I was the only technical resource on that team. The rest of the team was a business analyst that would meet with the business folks in Regeneron to get their apps onboarded into the IAM platform. We had a project manager, obviously a QA person who would do QA on the implementation or new connections, etc. But I was the only like hands-on technical person. So my day-to-day there, once we got the implementation stood up and matured, my day-to-day was meeting with people internal in Regeneron to talk about getting their application onboarded. And a lot of that work was also coming up with a process to intake folks that wanted to get their application onboarded. Once we got it going, the influx of Regeneron's a 10-person company. They do a lot of really interesting work in pharmaceuticals, and they were actually involved in some of the COVID stuff. So yeah, they do a lot of work, which is to say they have a lot of different applications and a lot of different user groups using these small applications that they still want to centralize authentication. So a lot of the work there was process based. Let's get a process down to take a request from, hey, I want my application onboarded to properly getting it onboarded. So there was that. There was creating run books for operations, like how do you troubleshoot? How do you do everything, right? Every step needed to be documented. So there was a ton of work doing that. But once that was done, my day-to-day was mostly meeting with those folks, scheduling time to get applications onboarded. Typically that happens on a weekend during off hours, meeting with the vendor, the software vendor, the SaaS vendor that they wanted to integrate with, and coordinating that way, as well as once applications were onboarded and users were using them, then troubleshooting any errors, whether that's with a specific application or with the platform in general, looking at logs and the day-to-day kind of maintenance, periodically patching or upgrading. So I was the only hands-on person there. And when you are working for a customer of Ping, that's like your day-to-day, whether there's a team or just one person like myself, but you're focused on getting value out of that application for the business, out of that platform for the business. Which is to say, the transition to a customer success architect at Ping when I joined was from a perspective of what are you doing? It's similar, right? You're still trying to help. And now instead of yourself and the business you work for, you're trying to help multiple clients of Ping get value out of the products that they already own. I was in a post-sales role, which is customer success. It's not there to try and sell you any new product, though, of course, part of the responsibility is, hey, if a customer says, we'd like to do X, Y, and Z, and they don't have the right product to do that, it's to mention it to them, educate them on it, demo it to them. That's part of the thing you do. But really the goal is to make sure that customers are maximizing their use of the products they already own. So that can be a mix of any number of Ping products. Typically, most customers own PingFederate, right? There's also the cloud SaaS, there's also MFA, and then there was Ping Directory and Ping Access, which is used for kind of medium grade authorization, right? When I joined Ping, I was pretty confident that I knew a lot of Ping stuff. I thought I'm pretty good at PingFederate and I'm decent at MFA and I'm pretty good at the cloud SaaS. Once you join Ping, you realize that you only know maybe 10 to 25% of what you need to
Agreed.
know.
Yeah.
So it's even with the product that you already know, there's so much to know, especially with PingFederate. Yeah, but day to day, it was a mixture of meeting with customers. You get assigned a roster of customers and you meet with them on a regular basis, whether that's biweekly or monthly or quarterly, depending on the customer, as well as ad hoc. They'll reach out and say, hey, we have this new use case. Can you help us? How do we achieve what we want to do here? A lot of times customers will also reach out and say, hey, I'm trying to do this and it's not working. Customer success is not the technical support department, but it is the department that is going to roll out a new use case or a new feature that you're not using in the products. Bringing that up in your lab environment and showing them how it works, right? To get them to be able to do it in their own environment. You're not going to touch a customer's environment as a customer success architect. You're just there to show them the possibilities and guide them. But there is a fair amount of reviewing logs and stuff like that because you get to know people and you want to help them as much as you can. So myself and most of the customer success, if not all of the customer success architects that I worked with on the team always went above and beyond the role description and dug in deep and helped customers like get over their hurdles. That's really the At the end of the day, that's really the goal, right? Is to have a customer be satisfied with the Ping products that they own and get as much value out of them as possible.
Agreed, absolutely. I think the primary role, whether you are an engineer, analyst, or an architect, is basically to understand customer requirement, whether they are trying to solve a password reset issue to complex integration and just trying to give them the right direction in order for you to fulfill it. So,
I always start out with what is your objective? What are you trying to accomplish? Not what is wrong or what can't you get working or what is your, let's start with what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to do integration with Office? Okay. What part of the integration are you working on? Is it just logging into the portal or are you doing something more advanced, which is registering devices in Active Directory and authentication during that process? I always take it a step back and then try to move forward because a lot of times customers may not even be doing the simplest or most correct way to achieve their actual objective, right? They get focused on this is what I thought I needed to do and it doesn't work. Where it's better to say, what are you trying to do? Let's get to the best way to do that.
absolutely, absolutely. Now, if you can help our viewers and audience deep dive into the Ping world, like what is Ping identity? What does it do? And maybe then we can delve into the different products Ping have come up with and
Sure.
then dissect them one by one.
Sure. Let's start with Ping as a company, right? Started about 20 years ago, mostly primarily at first as an authentication service, right? What the product did was centralize your authentication. That can mean different things to different people. At the end of the day, it's just using your single credential to log into multiple systems. So Ping Identity as a company grew, I think, I wouldn't say slowly. When I joined, which was in 20, there were still only about 700, maybe 700 employees globally. So not a big company when you consider the customer base that they had. I think when I recently in 23, they were up at about 12 employees and then scaled back in this last round of kind of consolidation with ForgeRock. They lost about 200 folks, which included myself. And so they're not a big company, but they do a lot of big things. They work with all the big players in Fortune 100, Fortune 50, Fortune 5, banking, you name it. And that's the organization there. I will say that it's a very collaborative environment. I learned very quickly that you can easily just go into Slack and ask there's product channels for each product, right? You can just ask any question, no matter how basic you may think it is or how complex it is. Multiple people, in fact, are going to reach out and give you the answer you're looking for to either help your customer or get you over the hurdle of whatever you're trying to test internally yourself. And so super collaborative, a lot of brilliant people work there, a lot of people that have been there for quite some time that know the products inside and out. So it's great that they have that kind of continuity. So what do? They do authentication, authorization, through a purchase of Unbound ID. They have a leading directory services product, Ping Directory. They have Ping Access for authorization. Now they have Ping Authorize for even better authorization, multiple MFA products. You have Ping ID for workforce MFA and Ping One MFA, the new one for kind of, at the time when it came out, it was for customer-based MFA, and now it's also being used in a workforce scenario. And then, of course, the latest and greatest is DaVinci, which is their orchestration engine, which allows you to orchestrate your authorization, authentication flows using both Ping products as well as external services that you can connect to. So that's really powerful. That's what they do. They're there to help other organizations solve their authentication and authorization, mostly whether cloud-based or on-prem, whatever works. They have an extensive integration library for on-prem software, especially, I think more so than other vendors, that allows you to use Ping as your front-end authentication and connect you to back-end systems that don't comply with the latest like SAML or OIDC or anything like that.
And going back to your journey again, initially moving into Ping or when you started to learn Ping, my only go-to resource was the Ping documentation because back then there was no training academies or institute which were giving training. What
Right.
was some of your references or resources that helped you, I would say, get into the Ping, get into the hands-on, right? As well as because even with those resources, you may only be able to solve a specific set of use cases, right? But then the journey across to becoming an IAM architect. Like I just want all of my audience to know about the different resources you had exposure to, or it could be some challenges that you might have faced. So can you give us a walkthrough on some of the resources that you used during your entire journey?
Sure. At first, it was definitely a challenge because when I was a Ping customer, they didn't really have a customer success team at all. And even if they did, Regeneron wasn't part of that program because their spend was minimal. And so I often
Mhm.
leaned on the sales architects that kind of worked with Regeneron during the sales process, as well as their technicals. We used to have a picture of me on the wall saying, "Don't answer this guy's call," because I was a frequent user of their technical support. But like I said, one of the things I loved about Ping was they were very responsive in that manner. So at first it was difficult because you're, like you said, leading on documentation, which the difference between Ping's documentation when I was a customer to today is night and day. Like the documentation, very dry, strictly like an admin guide that didn't really get into use cases so much as just different components and configurations within the product, but that didn't tie together all the different components that you needed to do for a specific use case, which now they have much more of that, which I'm happy to say I contributed to a lot of when I was a Ping employee. But yeah, in the beginning, it was tough. When you're getting your chops, right? You're not only looking at Ping documentation, but you're just looking for any kind of explanation of the concepts, right? And that may come from a different product's documentation, and then you turn it around. And I've had people come to me when I was at Ping Point and says, Optus documentation says do this. Ping doesn't have any documentation. Can you help me translate that? Which we do. And I did that as a customer. And then I asked those kind of questions. Hey, I see I can do it this way. How do we do it with Ping software? Now Ping's documentation team is much more robust and there's a lot more to go off of. But when I joined Ping is really when I leapfrogged in my understanding of IAM concepts and products, because you have to, right? When I joined as a customer success architect, there wasn't that many on the team, maybe 6 or 7. And you need to ramp up yourself pretty quickly. They did give new employees like myself about 3 months of ramp up time before you start talking to customers, which is good in a way. But I found that the real way is just you learn by doing. So customer comes to you and says, hey, I want to do XYZ. And if you don't know how to do that, you have to go read internal kind of documentation, right? Things that are in Confluence or whatever, just to be able to ask a question of someone else at Ping that may know how to do it. So you're asking the right questions to teach yourself how to do this thing so you can then educate your customer. At the time, and I joined, and I think still to this day, it's hard to get folks that you can hire in an architecture role like that have already come in with the experience, right? With a lot of knowledge. It's hard to do that. Now at Ping, we tried to hire, I interviewed folks. And once I got going there, I was part of the team that interviewed folks. And we try to hire people that can get the concept once they've been shown. People that have been in IT for a good amount of years. They may know some IAM, but not know Ping. That's great. If you already know IAM, but not know Ping, then we can show you the Ping way to do things.
Okay.
But you learn a lot on the job. Even myself, I was a Ping customer and I thought I knew PingFederate, but I knew the IDP side of PingFederate. Probably not as good as I thought I did, but I didn't know much about the service provider side of Ping. I wasn't a service provider at Regeneron. So yeah, you learn a lot on the job there. And thankfully, I don't want to scare anybody off that's a Ping customer. When you are working with a Ping customer success architect or Ping technical support, and if you happen to get someone that they may not know your specific question, right? But they may know 1,000 other questions, right? Everybody has a specialization kind of like product that they're better at than others because there's so many products. But the good thing about working at Ping is when you have a Ping contact as a customer, you not only have that person as a contact, but you have their entire team and the entire architecture team, pre-sales, post-sales, you name it. Everyone works together there. If a customer ever came to me with a use case and said, I don't know. And I said, let me find out the answer for you. When I got back to them, I had gone to my colleagues, found out the answer, implemented it in my own lab, fully understood it, then I'm able to, translate it to the customer. So you learn a lot on the job there. And that's really what made me, I knew enough to start as a customer success architect, but certainly after 5 years, I'm much more seasoned and able to do a lot of things from memory now without having to do a lot of research. You just over and over, everyone has the same requirements, right? Especially on a workforce side, if you specialize in workforce. Yeah. So you get to know certain things and you've seen it before. And, oh, okay, I know what you're trying to do and let's get to it. That's how I became an architect, is really just doing things on the job over and over. And then as new products come out, you self-train a lot at Ping. And they also have technical enablement where they train everyone. Yeah, I think you just need to be a curious kind of problem solver, right? If that's what gets you going in the day, like if that's what you enjoy doing, then you'll be a successful architect because the tools are all there for everyone. Everyone has the same tools. Everyone has the same documentation. Everyone has the same research. And how do you become a good architect is by understanding all of those little components and use cases and then being able to put them together into a secure solution for customers. We have a lot more training now. Ping now offers, they always offer kind of instructor-led training, which I always suggested to new customers. Hey, your team should take the training, right? But now they also offer self-paced online modules, which we didn't have before at Ping, which is great.
Okay. So basically, if I need to summarize this, anyone aspiring to be an architect, right, should first have a skill which is focused on customer requirement. I think that's how they should start off with. Then definitely the another skill would be trying to deep dive into multiple areas parallelly, not just stick to one domain. Third, again, identify resources, upskill themselves continuously in terms of knowledge of new protocols or new products or new features that is up there in the market, right? Anything else, Sal?
Yeah, I would say that's correct, especially in the IAM space. Most people come over from some other kind of, if they've been in IT for a while, they've been in some other kind of area, whether that's web or security or infrastructure. As long as you have those baseline skills, like it really helps to know you're an IAM architect. But if you don't know what DNS is, if you don't know how load balancing works, if you don't know those ancillary kind of technologies that all IAM systems rely on, then you're going to have a tough time. If you come in already with that kind of baseline skill, DNS, email, these different architectures, that's going to help you become an architect in the IAM space. But I will say, starting in IAM, I think everyone goes through the same journey where they start to learn authentication, right? SAML, right? Everybody learns SAML. And then maybe you get some requests in your organizations for OIDC, SSO, right? Which is much more modern and flexible. So you start out with the authentication and then you, okay, let's move. And this is the same journey that organizations take with their IAM platform. You would take as an IAM architect. Start out with authentication. Then you learn strong authentication, right? Multi-factor. You learn how to implement that. And then, oh, by the way, how do we do authorization, right? Now we're not talking about authentication, but what are you able to do inside a specific application? What are you authorized to do? So you add on that knowledge, right? And some folks in the beginning may also kind of, especially if you work for a customer service provider, you may learn the directory software, right? It's not Active Directory, right? Like when I joined Ping, I thought, oh yeah, I know Active Directory. So Ping Directory shouldn't be too difficult. They're two completely different animals. Right?
Yes, I also had the same notion that, okay, yeah, Ping Directory, similar to Active Directory, same schema, FISMO, all of that. But then you go there, okay, how do you even go to the console? You use a different directory structure to even log in, right? It's a completely different story.
Yeah, and you're talking Ping Directory, you're talking organizations that are serving millions of identities, not tens of thousands. But some people go that route. But it's authentication, authorization, and multi-factor. And then you start with the latest and greatest, which is the orchestration and stuff like that. So there is a kind of a progression of technologies, and it's similar to the progression of how an organization would implement those technologies. You can't implement these complex use cases until you start out with the basics. Yeah.
Okay, now getting into the resources part, right? We did discuss how difficult it was for you back then, maybe 5-6 years ago. But now if you look at how Ping has improved, right? If someone starting new, whether it is a fresher graduating from a college or anyone who's trying to get into the access side of the world from from a different domain, what are some of the things or resources that are available for someone to begin with? The 5 key skills one would need to build first before they get into the access side of the world.
Yeah, if you're already coming, like I said, with the ancillary architecture, understanding of networks and DNS and all that stuff, and you just want to get into IAM, then I just did this recently, right? Like I was laid off at Ping and I decided I have some free time. Let me go get my Okta certification. So with Ping or with Okta or any of these major kind of vendors, you're going to have a free instance that you can use for testing, right? Typically, that's the cloud based software, like the IDaaS software, not exactly the on-prem. But in terms of learning the concepts of SAML and LIDC, and even with Ping One, kind of the trial account, you can try out MFA, you can try out authorization, you can try out consent. So I would start with definitely one of the vendors' free instances. I just did this with Okta. I signed up for a free instance. I played around in there for a little bit, and I already know a lot of the concept. So it's just getting used to the interface for me. And I was able to pass my Okta certification like in 2 weeks of just poking around. But if you're brand new, it may take longer, but just starting with their free products. And then once you get an account and you have their free products, you have access to their documentation. You have access to, depending on the vendor, you may have access to online video training modules. Another good resource that I recommend is like online learning portals like Udemy. If you go to Udemy and you type in Okta, you will find 40 courses. I'm just throwing a number out there. There's a lot of courses that will train you on Okta. I didn't see a lot of Ping, and actually took a note for myself as maybe I can make a Ping video and sell it on Udemy.
Yes, that's a really good idea we are diving into, because I was about to put this up as a discussion because I've seen really good videos, I would say training material on Okta or even basic SAML, OAuth, OpenID, right? But Ping, I don't know why there is none, but yes, we don't have anything currently on Ping. And even I recommend people or someone getting into Ping is they do provide you a software, installable software, which you can use to download PingFederate or install PingFederate. And same
Right,
goes with Ping Access, PingFederate, I think Ping Directory also. And you get a 1 month's trial
right.
period, and then you can request for another one. And just you can just go and update the license to 2 things. You can install this Ping installable from the Ping identity downloads, and then you have the license that they need and maybe a virtual machine, which you can get free of cost on Azure or AWS for a free trial. I think they are all set with a Ping environment to
Yeah.
deep dive it.
Yeah, for sure. Like I am no longer a Ping employee. So now I have on my own personal Mac, I run VM Fusion Player, the free version, and I have PingFederate installed. They're the trial version as well. But yeah, those research Ping does have it talking about Ping specifically. They do have a lot of videos out on YouTube, which are basic. But again, if you're starting out with the basics, then those are good for you, right? As a Ping customer, you also get a lot of the online virtual library that they provide now. But not only Ping or Okta, but also there is like free software like Shibboleth, like all the SAML stuff is all the same. If you're just trying to learn that, you can learn that, as well as YouTube is very helpful to me, right? Well, especially when I was starting out at Ping and I needed to learn, you already know SAML, but maybe you don't know OAuth as well or OIDC. YouTube is great for that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah. And then just if you have any colleagues in the IAM space, reaching out to them. And most people are always happy to help. I certainly am. And yeah, that's how I would get started. And that's how I would get started knowing the product and the concepts. And then becoming an architect, and that's just a matter of like, how quickly are you able to put the pieces together? And
Yeah.
do you have prior architecture experience? Because being an architect in any domain is not just product knowledge, but it's like you said earlier, right? Collecting requirements and then understanding those requirements and then putting together a design, whether it's for a specific use case or for an entire implementation of a platform, putting that together and then having a testing kind of methodology. All those things are not something they teach you in school necessarily. You learn that on the
Absolutely.
job, you know.
Absolutely. And now getting into a little bit more on the IAM engineer side, right? What are the 5 skills if you are hiring an IAM engineer, right? Or if you want to excel in a career of an IAM engineer, what are the 5 skills that you would suggest anyone who would be starting or who are currently into this role to have?
So you mean besides actual product knowledge?
Yes, but even if someone has product knowledge, right? For example, I know PingFed and I'm doing SS regularly, right? I really need to excel in my career. So what
Oh,
do I do?
sure.
Should I learn directory or access or so? I think collectively, whether it's soft skill or technical skill?
Yeah. So soft skills for sure, like we already touched on, you want to be able to gather requirements and that kind of thing. But also what's important is your ability to traverse logs and find entries that are relevant to either showing a failure or a success. And also being able to, when you do find a reason for a failure, knowing what that kind of log entry means and how that can be troubleshooted is a huge skill set. As an architect, I worked with a number of customers who they had folks that knew how to run the ping interface and they knew how to do new connections. But as soon as something went wrong, they had no idea. Yeah. Certainly log review or troubleshooting is the number one skill. And that's valuable even when you're an architect, you might not be doing that on a day-to-day basis, but you're going to be called upon to help out if someone else can't figure it out, especially if you design the solution. So troubleshooting is a huge skill. And I think a lot of folks come to architect roles. They started out like I did in a help desk role or some kind of junior role where you learn that, but it's a never ending thing. Like the more you practice, the better you get at it. So from a soft skill perspective, in addition to requirement gathering and so on, I think that's super important. From a technology perspective, if you're in the IAM space, you already know authentication, but you really need to these days be super tuned into strong authentication factors like FIDO, passwordless flows, or it's no longer just as simple as everybody using their single sign-on password and then they swipe. Organizations are trying to mature beyond that model. So you need to know strong authentication. And with that, the next concept is risk-based technologies, right? So Ping has Ping One Risk, for example, and other vendors have their own risk layer where in the authentication flow, there's an agent or a JavaScript in the browser or something that runs that collect data and sends it up to a risk management engine that analyzes that data and provides a risk score in return. And that's super important to kind of these days have in your environment and as an IAM professional, understand that technology. So risk is huge. And then obviously authorization when you get into, okay, Ravi's allowed in this application, but when he clicks on the admin link, we need to authenticate that. And these days, it's not as simple as just like a one-time authentication event, right? You want to do with zero trust technologies, you want to be constantly evaluating the request and then asking for stronger authentication if necessary, combined with the risk engine. All these things come together. It's like a big mesh now. It's not just, oh, hey, I know how to do SSO. If you know how to do SSO, that gets you in the door. But these other technologies are certainly what you need to know to be able to say, okay, I can apply for a IAM architect position.
Okay. So basically, it's the first key being troubleshooting skills, right? As one of the key things. Second is analyzing logs, right? And then you have understanding of things like zero trust or role based access controls or even automation, right? So those kind of things. And also, one of the important thing would be before we move into all of this, a foundation of basic concepts like authentication, authorization, MFA, single sign on, like provisioning, all of these would be a starting point, right? And then you elevate from there.
Yeah, that's a good one. You brought up a good one that I forgot to mention, which is provisioning, and that's huge. Certainly, whether you are trying to do provisioning from your IAM platform or you have a dedicated kind of provisioning engine like SailPoint. Like I wish I was a SailPoint expert. That's like an interesting IAM wing that I'm not hands-on with. But yeah, provisioning in general, just-in-time provisioning is huge, where when a user authenticates through your IAM platform, an account is created, or also pre-provisioning through SCIM. SCIM is a huge technology to understand in the IAM world as well.
Okay, just for the audience, what is SCIM? Can you try to explain this, like in terms of implementation?
Sure. Yeah. I forget the acronym, like SCIM. It's like System Cross Identity Management or something. I probably mangled that. But basically, SCIM provisioning is when you use APIs over the internet to create an account for your users at a vendor's application, right? So for example, a lot of big customers do SCIM provisioning to either Slack or Udemy, right? I worked a lot with the Slack team and the Udemy team to work on the integration between Ping and their product. Each IAM platform, whether that's Ping, Okta, you name it, has SCIM built in. It's a separate process from authentication. That's not necessarily part of the authentication process, but the same engines can be used to do SCIM provisioning. So at a base level, the SCIM provider, the resource you're trying to create an account for, as an endpoint that accepts SCIM API calls, create user, update user, delete user. and your IAM platform like PingFederate will send a SCIM request over the internet to that endpoint with the details of the user that the vendor is expecting to receive, like first name, last name, phone number, department, maybe whatever is required there. And how something like PingFederate does it is they monitor your directory. And that could be either an LDAP filter or it can be a group created specifically for that SCIM vendor. So say you're trying to create users in Slack, you have a group in your Active Directory called Slack users. And anytime a user is put into that group in Active Directory, when PingFederate, when its SCIM provisioning cycle runs, will check that group and notice that the group's membership has changed, either additions or deletions or both, and then run the required commands to send requests to the vendor's API endpoint to either create or remove those users on the vendor side. So
Okay.
very kind of basic explanation there, but it's monitoring your LDAP for changes. There's different algorithms that can be used for that. And then when the SCIM engine realizes that group has been changed, it runs through the group to see what has changed. Okay, there's a new user in there. Robbie, he's not been provisioned to Slack before. I'm going to send an API request to the SCIM endpoint at Slack that says, create a new user, Robbie. He's part of this department. And then on the vendor side, when they receive that SCIM request, not only have they created a user account for Robbie, so now Robbie can SSL into Slack, right? Without error. But because we've sent the department or team or whatever other SCIM attribute the vendor supports, they can then be provisioned to specific Slack channels within Slack. And not only can you authenticate, but you are automatically a member of the HR group and the HR Slack channel. So that's how, like a quick explanation.
Okay. So basically, if I summarize this, it is a way of provisioning, like we have manual provisioning where applications can go and create users manually on the application side during the SSO process. This is one way of automating this entire provisioning cycle where you're relying on the identity provider, which is PingFederate in our case, right? Where if you're trying to access as a new user from a user perspective, there is auto provisioning that is happening both on the application side as well as on the IDP side, and the backend developers do not have to create the manual. So that's it from the first part. I hope you enjoyed the first part of the podcast. And on the coming episode, we will be getting further deep dive into Ping identity products and the life of an architect. What does an architect do on a day-to-day basis? What are the use case that Sal has solved, and so many more exciting things. So make sure you have a pen and a notebook. Till then, thank you very much for supporting us. And if you have liked the podcast, please comment down below and like the video. That means a lot to us. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.